I never thought moving into a quiet suburban neighborhood would mean having to deal with the kind of drama that could fill entire chapters of a novel. When my wife and I decided to buy this place, we were thinking of calm mornings, friendly neighbors waving while watering their lawns, and children riding bikes on safe streets. For the most part, that's exactly what we got. But then there was her. The one person who seemed to think she owned every inch of property that wasn't directly under her roof. Everyone knew her, and everyone whispered about her behind closed doors. Her name was Karen, and she was the self-appointed queen of the homeowners association. She carried herself as if she had been crowned ruler of our cul-de-sac and everyone else existed solely to follow her orders. At first, I thought the stories I heard were exaggerated. People complained that she spied on their driveways, sent nasty emails about the color of their curtains, and even once demanded that someone remove a harmless wind chime because the sound was a violation of community peace. It sounded like the kind of gossip that people love to spread in small communities. But it didn't take long before I experienced it firsthand. Our house had a tall wooden fence enclosing the backyard. My wife loved the privacy it gave her when she wanted to sit outside after long shifts at the dispatch center, sipping tea and letting the stress roll off her shoulders. Karen, apparently, hated that fence. She told me directly one afternoon while I was mowing the lawn. She marched over, hands on her hips, and said, "This fence violates the aesthetics of the neighborhood." I paused, staring at her like she had just spoken another language. The fence had been approved during the sale. It wasn't new. It wasn't broken. And it certainly wasn't against any rules. I told her exactly that. She narrowed her eyes, scribbled something into the little notepad she carried around, and said we would hear from the HOA soon. I wasn't intimidated. My wife had already checked the HOA rules before we even closed on the house. Everything was in order. Still, I brushed it off as the kind of neighborly annoyance we could just ignore. What I didn't expect was how relentless she would become. She showed up unannounced at odd hours, rattling the gate to see if it was locked, peeking over the fence as if she had every right to snoop into our backyard. She left letters stuffed into our mailbox about community standards and respecting neighborhood harmony. The first few times, I tossed them out. My wife laughed and said, "Don't let her get under your skin. She thrives on reactions." But Karen wasn't just fishing for reactions. She was escalating. It all came to a head one Saturday morning. I had just finished fixing a section of the fence where a storm had knocked down a few boards. I was sweaty, covered in dust, and ready to grab a cold drink. That's when I heard the unmistakable sound of someone trying the latch on our gate. I walked around the corner, and there she was, standing bold as ever, hand gripping the latch like she was about to walk right in. "What do you think you're doing?" I asked, sharper than I intended. "This property needs to be inspected," she said without hesitation. "The HOA has reason to believe you've made unauthorized changes." I couldn't help but laugh. "Unauthorized changes? To my own fence? You've got to be kidding me." "It's not your fence," she snapped back. "It's part of the neighborhood's shared visual identity. I have every right to make sure it's compliant." Now I was angry. "You have no right to come onto my property. This is trespassing. Back away from the gate." Her face flushed red, and for a moment, I thought she might actually try to push her way in. But then she stepped back, pulled out her phone, and with a smug little smirk, said, "Fine. If you won't let me in, I'll just call the police. Let's see what they have to say about your attitude." I almost rolled my eyes. There was no law being broken here except her attempt to trespass. But I didn't stop her. If she wanted to humiliate herself, so be it. She dialed 911 right there in front of me, pacing dramatically like she was starring in her own reality TV show. She raised her voice, making sure I could hear every word. "Yes, hello, I'm a member of the Homeowners Association, and I'm being threatened by a very aggressive man who's blocking me from conducting an inspection. He's shouting at me and refusing to cooperate." I felt my jaw tighten. She was lying through her teeth, painting me as some dangerous aggressor when all I'd done was stand my ground. But what she didn't know was who exactly was going to pick up that call. Inside our house, my wife was sitting at the kitchen table with her headset on, covering a shift from home thanks to the department's new remote dispatch system. When Karen's call came through, it was routed directly to her. My wife glanced at the address, recognized it immediately, and had to cover her mouth to stop herself from laughing. She listened carefully as Karen spun her story, describing me as some sort of neighborhood menace. My wife, ever the professional, kept her voice steady. "Ma'am, can you confirm your location?" she asked, already knowing full well that the lunatic standing outside our gate was talking about her own husband. Karen gave our address with all the authority of someone who thought the world revolved around her. Yes, hurry. He's glaring at me right now. I feel unsafe. My wife typed a few notes into the system, keeping her composure. All right, officers will be dispatched to the scene. In the meantime, please remain calm and do not escalate the situation. Too late for that, Karen said dramatically, shooting me a pointed look. He's already hostile. My wife muted her microphone and burst out laughing. I wish I could have seen her face in that moment, realizing that the neighborhood tyrant had no idea she was crying wolf to the very person married to her supposed aggressor. Out by the gate, I folded my arms and waited. If the police were really coming, I wanted to make sure they saw the truth with their own eyes. Karen continued her performance, pacing back and forth, muttering about unsafe neighbors and legal action. I kept my cool, though my blood boiled inside. This woman was wasting everyone's time and trying to tarnish my reputation, all because I wouldn't let her trample over my rights. 10 minutes later, a squad car pulled up. 2 officers stepped out, looking more tired than alarmed. They had probably dealt with Karen before. She rushed toward them, hands waving, voice raised, pointing at me like I was some criminal mastermind. There, that's him. He threatened me, he's hostile, and he's hiding something behind that fence. The officers turned their eyes toward me. I raised my hands slightly, not in surrender but in a clear, calm gesture. Gentlemen, this woman tried to trespass on my property. When I told her no, she called you and made up lies. I have security cameras if you'd like to see exactly what happened. Karen scoffed, but the officers exchanged a glance. Ma'am, one of them said, did he physically threaten you in any way? She hesitated, caught off guard by the straightforward question. Well, not exactly. But his tone was very intimidating. Tone isn't a crime, the officer replied dryly. And unless you were invited, you can't enter his property without permission. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish. She clearly hadn't expected the police to side against her. She tried again, lowering her voice, but he's hiding violations. He won't let me see what he's done back there. That's not our concern, the second officer said. This is a civil matter between you and the HOA. We're not here to enforce neighborhood politics. Karen's face turned crimson. She looked like she was about to explode, but the officers cut her off before she could ramp up again. Ma'am, we're going to have to ask you to leave his property line. If you continue to harass him, he can press charges for trespassing and harassment. I'll admit, that moment felt like pure vindication. She had called the cavalry, and instead of storming my castle, they told her to back off. What she still didn't realize was that the real story had only just begun. My wife, still sitting at the kitchen table, had listened to the entire call, followed the office's radio chatter, and was already crafting a plan.